Okay, great. So I can't see others. Normally we would have live events and it would look a bit different than today, but we're very happy that so many people have joined us for this important discussion. And again, during the crisis, this discussion will have a different impact for sure, because the sector is really affected by COVID-19, obviously. So we would like to just introduce ourselves very, very briefly, also because we're still waiting for a few people. So my name is Karina Boomsma. I run Sustainable and Inclusive Business. This is under the KEPSA Foundation. So the private sector in Kenya, we really try to support businesses to be more sustainable and more inclusive. Obviously, this is a very important new ban that we cannot ignore at all. Single-use plastic, and why single-use plastic items are banned in restricted areas in Kenya at the moment, or actually from the 5th of June. So we want everyone to prepare. Now we have, of course, different challenges we will dive into with the COVID-19 here with us, and it's not yet over. So what we would like to show you first is why actually do we have a single-use plastic ban. But before, we want to show you a little video of how we can completely rule out, or an example of a very funny and juicy story in India, how they deal with no actually packaging.
Let us introduce you to Eat Raja. Situated in Bengaluru's Malleshwaram, Eat Raja is a zero-waste juice shop. Eat Raja does not use cups, straws, or any kind of paper or plastic. The shop offers juice in the shell or husk of the fruit from which it is made to avoid any wastage. This not only eliminates the need for water to clean the glasses, but also helps recycle the solid waste that is generated. People who bring their own steel cups can get their drinks at a discount. In case a customer asks for a straw, they provide it with a steel straw or one made out of bamboo or leaves.
Hi, my name is Raja. Welcome to Eat Raja, India's first zero-waste juice bar. I'm so happy and proud to say that, because we are India's first juice bar to serve juices completely in only fruit shells. So the reason why we share or sell all the juices in fruit shells is only to avoid plastic and any single-use disposable. So since I have done my engineering, I said, can we engineer the process to such a level that there is no waste being generated at all? What's the point of having done engineering and if we don't apply that knowledge in our day-to-day life? So when I looked at the fruit cup, normally what we do is we drink the juice and throw away the skins or the peels. So I said, can we do reverse engineering? Instead of throwing, can we repurpose it to something else? So when I look at the watermelon, so that it can be cut into two halves and it becomes a beautiful cup. So we scooped out the fruit and made juice and served right within that. So natural and so Instagram worthy. And of course, it doesn't generate any waste. After you drink the juice, you can always feed it to the cow, which means that what comes from the soil goes back to the soil. As we say in Kannada, marali mandige. And that is the concept of zero waste. So if you can generate no waste at all, imagine there is no waste generated, so there is no need to manage waste. And what Eat Raja stands for.
So that was a nice example of not using or actually creating waste at all. And that is also what we actually want to address, because single-use plastic is a big topic, because there is so much single-use plastic we're currently using. If you walk into the supermarket, everything is single-use plastics, and we know that. But for the industry, the tourism, the hospitality, and the MICE industry, obviously there are specific items you use much more than anywhere else, like refillable cups, plastic water bottles, etc. So those kind of things have an immediate impact on your business because you use them. You might show tourists around and you carry water bottles for them. Now, those kind of things, we want to talk about how can we actually tackle it and what are the alternatives to use, which items are actually quite a challenge to manage, and also what kind of regulations are we facing and how do we communicate about it with our consumers. Now, one thing we have to have clear is that those kind of items are banned because they're being found most in the environment. So these 10 items are actually the most difficult items apparently to manage, and therefore they are littered a lot. They say in the beaches, in the European statistics, 75% of the litter on beaches and parks are those 10 items. The other 25% on beaches are fishing gear and ghost fishing gear. So that is why they are being banned. It's not because those are the things we now suddenly came up with which are bad, but they're just lying around in the nature. And it will take a long time to biodegrade, and in the meantime it has caused a lot of issues, which is very bad for the environment, but immediately for us and for our health as well. So these are the items being okay, sorry, I'm going back because we will do the regulations. We can do them a tiny little bit later. If you have any questions, by the way, you can chat them. You can put them in the chat box, and then we can respond to it while we're talking. This is a very open webinar. We also will share later. We have a trend report we will send to everyone who's registered. And we also have a quick crash course where you can just actually run through a lot of rules and regulations and tips and tricks quickly again. So we will give you that package afterwards. Now to look at, I'm just thinking, Ebenezer, are we going to wait for Faith and do this on the
Faith is here already. Faith is here already. Hi, Faith.
Faith, hi, morning. Faith is our specialist on public-private dialogue and policies especially. And she is, I think, the best one to talk to if you want to know every rule and regulation in our country, either being shaped or already in place. So we actually wanted to ask her for the nitty-gritty facts and details in the law and in the, sorry?
Yeah, thanks, Karine. She's having some difficulties, so I think we can move to the next two slides, and then we'll come back to this.
Okay, fine. So out of the 10, in the plastic ban we have in Kenya, we have actually 10 items. They are cotton buds. They're actually completely a copy of what other countries have been doing. Cutlery, plates, straws, stirrers. We have wet wipes and sanitary items. We have food containers. We have beverage containers, and those are also the water bottles and the PET, because PET is what your water bottle and your sodas are packed in. Then there are crisps packets, sweet wrappers, bread bags, and yeah, all the small wrappers you have, sticks for balloons and balloons, cups for beverages, and cigarette butts. So those are the items they are currently banning in restricted areas. And those are the most littered items we find in the environment, in areas where people enjoy recreation, spending leisure time, being a tourist, walking around, having a picnic, visiting a park, and enjoying social time. So this is what we're currently facing in terms of what will be forbidden. Now, the areas we are going to face that are in Kenya, oopsie daisy, the national parks, national reserves and wildlife sanctuaries, national monuments, World Heritage sites, beaches, and protected forest. So these are the areas where we find it most, and that is the area where we want to stop littering at all. Then we would like to actually, before we go into regulations and how to communicate and what can we do, what are the correct alternatives, we would like to do a quick poll. So could you choose, is the ban on single-use plastics good for the tourism industry, yes or no? So we would like to do a very quick poll. And it is written like the band, so it could bring some music later into the story. Ebenezer, would I be able to see then what the percentages of people that think that is quite a good idea and people are not?
Hi, Karina, thanks. So I'll be giving you the results. I see people are still answering the question. We have about 37 participants in the room. We have about 28 of them have already answered the question. So I'll encourage the rest to do the same. It will just take a few moments and then we'll give you the results.
Great. Yeah, because what we will also do a tiny bit later is to invite people from the sector, because we are facing a different world now with COVID. There's actually more use of single-use plastics. There's also the single-use masks. We are more concerned about our hygiene, so you will use more single-use plastics and items, so you don't have to be worried about whether it's cleaned well enough. So we're actually, with this COVID-19, we're actually facing an increase in plastic and single-use plastic use. So this will bring in new challenges. So pre-COVID, we had challenges to swap to alternatives, but now we have actually challenges to swap to alternatives, but actually up our standards on hygiene and people's feeling of security about that. So
yeah, Karina?
good.
So
yes.
We have the results with us. We have about 37 participants and we have 100% response from the team. And the result is, drum rolls, 90% say yes and 10% say no. So we'll also want to hear from the 10% in terms of what is their opinion on why they think that the single-use plastic ban is not a good thing for the tourism industry. So I'll encourage you to use the chat room to raise your questions or give your comments so that we can address it as we proceed. Thank you so much for participating on the polls. Karina,
That's great. But it's a very positive number to have 90% actually thinking that it's a good thing, because if you think it's a good thing, you probably will make an effort to make it work as well. So that is a very strong statement from the industry itself, which is very positive. I will wait for some questions and respond to that. We would like to...
plants, whatever. And then over the next 150 million years or so, they're crushed under enormous pressure and heat, until roughly speaking, they become oil. Fast forward to the present day, and we extract this crude oil and send it down hundreds of mile pipelines to a refinery, where it's refined into petroleum amongst other things, and shipped to a plastic processing plant. Here it's turned into these tiny plastic pellets called nurdles. Now don't be fooled by their cutesy name. Nurdles are nasty little things, responsible for mass devastation of marine ecosystems, where they pollute oceans and end up in the food chain, often killing fish that mistakenly eat them. Anyway, these nurdles are the basic form a lot of plastic is made into for shipping and easy melting, where at a factory, in this case one that manufactures disposable cutlery, they can be melted and moulded into knives, forks and spoons. The finished cutlery is now packaged in yet more plastic, loaded in a container and onto a large cargo ship, and then taken often thousands of miles to whichever country has ordered them. Once there, they're unloaded and shipped by lorry to a large distribution centre, before typically being shipped again to a smaller... Millions of years ago, living turned into these tiny plastic pellets called nurdles. Now don't be fooled by their cutesy name. Nurdles are nasty little things, responsible for mass devastation of marine ecosystems, where they pollute oceans and end up in the food chain, often killing fish that mistakenly eat them. Anyway, these nurdles are the basic form a lot of plastic is made into for shipping and easy melting, where at a factory, in this case one that manufactures disposable cutlery, they can be melted and moulded into knives, forks and spoons. The finished cutlery is now packaged in yet more plastic, loaded in a container and onto a large cargo ship, and then taken often thousands of miles to whichever country has ordered them. Once there, they are unloaded ship by lorry to a large distribution centre, before typically being shipped again to a smaller warehouse, and then once more to the specific shop or fast food outlet where they're required. Let's suppose it's a coffee shop, and the customer is given a disposable plastic spoon. Now it all comes down to this spoon, the culmination of millions of years of processes and the work of thousands of people around the world. It's travelled several thousand miles just to be at this very coffee shop at this very moment in time. And then it's used to stir a single cappuccino clockwise for precisely 2.5 seconds, and then simply thrown in the bin forever. That's mad. We've got this ridiculously long, complicated and incredibly harmful model that produces a utensil intended for just a single use. One use, before it's thrown away forever and sent to landfill, where it will take over half a millennium to break down. Or worse, it ends up in our rivers and oceans or washed up on our beaches. Be it cutlery, straws, lids, drinks bottles, carrier bags, food packaging, you name it. Single-use plastic is wasteful, it's harmful and it's unsustainable. So what can you do? Avoid single-use plastic wherever possible. Purchase a reusable drinks bottle. Bring your own reusable plastic cutlery. Take your own bag shopping with you. And if you're throwing a barbecue or event and it seems impossible not to use disposable items, try and find cutlery made of biodegradable plastic and use paper cups and straws instead. So the next time you find yourself in a coffee shop and you're about to pick up a disposable spoon, just pause for a moment and remember how utterly ridiculous it really is.
So great. So we're actually going back to the regulations with Ebenezer. And later we will also discuss a little bit of this video, which people know. People know it's not sustainable, actually, the way we are using plastics, the way we manage it, and how we think it's really cheap, because we actually didn't include the full price of actually the pressure on the environment. It's not included in the price at all. So we will look at the why alternatives sometimes are actually super cool. We will look at why alternatives are sometimes quite difficult to sell and how you could do that best, and also what kind of alternatives we have to be careful with, because we will discuss very briefly also the biodegradable items and how to deal with those, because that is quite a tricky story. We go back to the regulations with Ebenezer. I think Faith is
yes, Karina.
hold up in a meeting. Yes.
So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, and we appreciate you taking your time to register at this webinar. And as for a fact, if you looked at the invitation, we were looking at the draft and Environmental Management and Coordination Act regulations that we are calling the Extended Producer Responsibility regulations. So this was shared with the ministry, and today we just want to take a quick overview so that and then we'll get responses from you. We know for sure.
Ebenezer, yes? Sorry, Ebenezer, sorry. There are two people. They're not on mute, and you can hear really loud. I think they're in a matatu. Can you mute them, please?
Okay.
Yeah.
The muted.
Yeah. Sorry, you could hear someone else talking loudly.
No problem. Thank you so much. Yeah. As you note that a few years back there was a ban on the pit bugs, and of course this went on in terms of interaction with the government and also the private sector, and then we got to the point where we had an extended producer responsibility for the PET bottles. So we have a company called Petco that is looking at trying to get back from the environment PET bottles and recycling them. So that's handled by Petco. But we also saw that there was need for the management of other waste streams. And that is why stakeholders came together that's CAPSA, private sector, CAM, and other participants in the sector came in and contributed to the development of the regulations that we call the Environmental Management and Coordination regulations. In bracket, they put it as the extended producer responsibility. So it's still in draft, and stakeholders were still giving in their feedback. So if you look at the purpose of the extended producer responsibility regulations, one of the things that we see that is being championed here is that we need to promote circular economy business models. So why do I say this? If you go through it, you'll find that it encourages for the establishment of PRO, that is a producer responsibility organization, that then takes up the responsibility of sourcing waste from the environment. And they are supposed to do this on behalf of the producers. We have a definition of producers within the regulations that basically says that these are people who produce or introduce product into the environment, whether it be that you're introducing a package or you're introducing a product that has a package in it. So you ought to have or take the responsibility of that particular product up to the end of life. That means you also take responsibility up to the point where a customer disposes of that particular product into the environment. So the circular economy model basically says that we not only make, use and dispose, but we also need to ensure that we get it back and try to either we try to either recycle this or reuse so that we get the maximum use of this particular product. The other thing that we see in this particular regulation is that we encourage the sustainable use of natural resources. Of course, we know that our resources are not infinite. I mean, they could come to an end. So we need to use them in a sustainable way so that we not only just use our natural resources and dispose them without taking care of our environment. So this is very important thing that is trying to be addressed with these regulations. We also see that we're encouraging promoting of innovation within this particular regulation, because within the draft, it encourages the producer to also design their products in such a way that they are they call it eco-friendly products. So that means that we are supposed to take care of the environment so that we do not harm our environment. So innovation is encouraged within this space. And then the one important thing again is that the costs on the environment is included, because the producers will need to incorporate this within their pricing model, so that it takes care of the costs of the EPR or the PRO, producer responsible organization, going into the environment and working with the waste pickers and other collectors to get the products back to be able to what is going away, sorry, to recycle. Yeah. So this is a very important element in terms of the costing structure. So this will be included. If you look at the model of the PRO, it means that the producers who are part of the PRO scheme will be contributing a particular fee, and this fee could be included in the prices of their products. So it means that there's something that will happen is that the cost will be either pushed to the consumer, or the producer will most definitely absorb it. So there are two models that one can adopt in this case. You either push it to the consumer or you absorb it. So that also depends with the demand and supply of that particular product. If the prices change abruptly and the consumption reduces, then the producer in this case if you look at the forces of demand and supply, then the producer will need to absorb it. So this also brings in the discussion in terms of who absorbs this cost. Again, it also provides room for the establishment of a producer responsibility organization, power waste stream. So the regulation says that we should be able to have one PRO per waste stream in this case. And of course, it also encourages a pilot phase. So there are two options. You can either be part of a producer responsible organization, or you as a producer can initiate a PRO on your own behalf. So you have two options there. So you can run it by yourself, or you can be part of a producer responsible organization where you pay a certain amount of money for them to be able to take up this responsibility that is upon you. Then the other thing that we also see within this regulation reading through is that it helps businesses to think how, one, they design their products, and two, how their products affect the environment. And we also have an element of job creation within this, because we also see that you'll have created jobs for the collectors, we'll be taking care of our environment will be a bit clean. So these are the positive things that we see in the regulation. But of course, we also give you an opportunity to also contribute and say which aspects do you think need to be readjusted or changed in this case. Karina, I think we can move to the next slide.
Let me unmute. Yeah, just very briefly, those regulations are for the producers, basically, and then specifically on plastic waste management. So this doesn't apply to tourism, MICE, and hospitality industry directly, but more to the Coca-Colas of this world. And the people who use the bread bags, for instance, or provide you with the straws. The reason why we are looking at those regulations as well is that they're very much in line and they support other decisions being made. Like if from a producer's side, we have more responsible and better laws and regulations in place, you probably will find better alternatives and less of the single-use plastics you're not allowed to use in those restricted areas either. So things are going hand in hand, and it's also showing that the government is serious about waste management in Kenya and how to actually define the laws and the policies and regulations that can help to avoid the impacts on the environment. And it enables actually a circular economy way of thinking. So it really contributes as well to the bigger conversation we're having. And what do we use for what purpose? Why are we using it? What is the quality of that, what we're using? Why is the quality not viable for recycling? Should we then use it? So it will impose much more circular thinking around materials we're using. And that's actually what we want to do, and closing loops and be sustainable. The items we've discussed.
Yeah, Karina?
I see a question, yes.
We've had some questions coming in before we went live on this webinar, but we also have a question coming in. So one question that was raised before that we can try and also tackle, we'll be able to try and tackle these questions as we go. Someone asked, I believe this was Melina, where should the focus be on? Managing and disposal of waste correctly rather than outright bans. So I believe the question here is asking, should the focus be on going straight away on bans, or look at this disposal of waste?
Yeah, it's a very good, yes, it's a very good question, because you don't want to, I mean, obviously plastics being used everywhere. So bans are always quite difficult. However, what you see is that the bans on items are the items that are causing the most problems in terms of littering, and apparently we find it really hard to dispose them responsibly. So that is where you see bans coming in. We had a year and a half ago, I think, a threat of a PET ban in general. And if you look at PET, where your water is being packed in most of the time, or your sodas, but it's not only that, it's much more than that. So if you then say, okay, let's do a PET ban, you're facing a very, very, very complicated and big challenge. That is really seriously changing the whole industry. So what you see is that governments are, what we can't dispose and what we cannot get rid of quickly, in the sense that there's not a proper way of disposing, there you see the bans coming in, which I think is quite right. Now you can question, yes, if you would dispose them properly and you have a really good waste management system behind it, and there's maybe on PET a lot of recycling industry behind it, then you might be able to still use it because we deal with it in a responsible way. So yes, I think what you will see, that's why this ban is in restricted areas. It's not on everything, it's not in general. You can still buy all the items in a supermarket, and then you can take it home, and but you're not allowed to bring it into restricted areas to avoid litter. So I think that is what happens, and that's why when one would go for a ban and one will go for putting a proper waste management system in place.
Yeah. So we'll take one more question, then we proceed with the presentation so that we don't take too long here. But we'll also take more questions towards the end. So I believe this is Kim David asked. I'm not so sure whether this question would fit in, but when did the ban on plastic bags start? And is there a difference between the use of a netted plastic that they use in packaging? So I believe the question here is in terms of what currently is being used by other supermarkets or other private sector institutions to package.
It's a good question, because we can also, it might not be immediately relating to the 10 items, but that doesn't matter, because it's a very good question. If you have a ban, you see that suddenly alternatives come up and they're actually not better at all. So when you have a ban, you have to also know what you're doing and what are the alternatives being allowed. So to be very honest with you, the netted plastic is not better at all. Okay, the only thing, the difference between plastic bags, they clutter the drainage, and they were found in the environment really causing trouble also with floods, and that you will have less with nets because there are holes in it. But the material is not better at all, and there's no one picking it up and recycling it either. So it's not a great alternative. And I think that is a very good discussion to have as well. We have to also be very careful with materials called biodegradables, and actually in Europe they have stopped diving into that as alternatives, because a lot of the times a paper cup does contain a plastic layer to prevent a hot drink from going through the wetting your paper and making it soft. So a lot of the biodegradable products, first and foremost, you don't know really what it contains, whether it's completely a natural biomaterial, and then to decompose, and you actually have laboratory kind of circumstances, and we never have that. You know, your biodegradable coffee cup, most of the time, if you tuck it into your garden, you will still find it 7 months down the line. So it will still impact the environment, and it still doesn't do the purpose. The third really issue with biodegradables is that if you mix them with plastic, because they might look like plastic, they ruin all the opportunities for plastic recycling. So if you have a batch of pure plastic, one type of plastic to recycle, and you contaminate that with biodegradable materials, then you have very difficulties recycling. So those alternatives are really tricky, and we don't know enough about it. And consumers for sure can't tell what the difference is. So we need to really make sure that if we use it and it needs to be super well labeled. We need to understand exactly what kind of material we are looking at, and we need to know as a consumer exactly how to dispose it properly. There was one more question, I think, maybe Ebenezer, about COVID-19.
So actually, Shah brings in an interesting question here in terms of perspective, looking at the current situation of COVID-19. And she asked, does this accelerate or slow down the use of single-use plastic for beverage or food? And then there are also concerns in terms of safety for food value chain. And I believe the other question, what is the degree of the mass flow of plastic waste in the environment coming from non-packaging such as fashion industry, fishing industry, and what kind of restrictions are being considered for these sectors? So I believe those are quite those are about 4 questions.
A lot of questions in one go. Let me just try and be very brief.
Yeah,
I
sure.
do think there's an increase towards the use of single-use plastic. I think people are very concerned about health issues at the moment, and also people are more in a survival mode anyway. So I think on the short term you will see an increase, and it will be an extra challenge to tackle single-use plastics. I hope, but that's my hope and I believe in it, but I think on the long term we will actually have an extra reason to really look at what we're doing, because ultimately by not taking care of our environment or not feeling part of nature, we're actually causing those kind of crises to happen. So we need to readjust how we live and what our footprint is on this world. So I hope on the long term it will actually encourage us to think better and to rethink how we use materials and how we impact the environment and our health straight away. For the non-packaging, it's 40% of plastics being used for packaging in the world. So that's the answer on a number. And then, yeah, fashion industry, different topic for a different day, because that is because we have fibers and we have plastics, and that ends up in the environment as well, and it causes leakage in. And yes, there are industry measures, but it's a good topic for the next one, textiles and circular economy and textile. We will have another webinar on that.
Yeah, sure. Karina, I think we have Faith on the line. She's just joining the webinar. She can, since we're still on the regulations, she can just give us a quick snippet in terms of how the regulations were developed, and just focus in terms of what are the key areas that this ban is going to focus on, because at times we have this misconception that the regulation will be the ban is on the entire country. So those questions I believe will have been addressed if she just gives us a quick overview. Faith, are you there?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ebenezer, for getting me in even at this hour. And thank you for highlighting the objectives of the extended producer responsibility regulations. Maybe what the best thing I can be able to do in the next 5 minutes is just to give like a background of where did we come from until we got to the ban, and why the proposed ban, and maybe answer the question that you just asked right now. So plastic as a product, as a material itself, is not a bad material. If anything, it is a very versatile material that is used in the economy today. It is light, it is highly durable, it is portable, it is convenient, and it is used in a number of sectors, in construction, automotive, in health, in hospitality. The material is used in very, very many sectors, and not just one sector alone. But the challenge with plastic is its leakage to the environment, and the fact that it is non-biodegradable and therefore can stay in the environment for many, many years. And as a result of our use for many years, then our environment is actually choking with plastic. So what the government has been grappling with for the last 10 years is how do we best manage the pollution that arises from plastic? So the issue is not the plastic itself, but how to manage the pollution that arises from the plastic, from the use of the plastic material. And there has been engagements between private sector and government since 2015 on this subject. But I think we took long to really get to understand, and for me, I just said that from private sector, to really understand what government was trying to achieve, because we argued from economic perspective, but government was not for the economic perspective alone, but for the environmental sustainability. Globally, about 14%, only 14% of plastic is recycled. In Kenya, only about 10% of the plastic is recycled. So there is very low reuse of the plastic material after use. And it is these numbers that eventually fill in our dump site, fill in our landfills, fill in our roadways, fill in our sewage system. And therefore they have choked the environment, and therefore it was important that government steps in and be able to put in a measure that controls that. To get us to the ban, in 2017, yes, there was the ban of the polythene bag, of the plastic carrier bag that we all have now gotten used that it is no longer in use formally. Though in one or another you still find it here and there, but you all agree with me the volume has reduced. Then still in the same 2017, then the government moved to ban the use of PET bottles in Karura Forest and national reserves areas and the game parks. I think this was not very loud, but it was still in the same year in 2017. So in 2018, government entered into a framework of cooperation with producers through the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. And what they wanted to do was to initiate a way in which private sector can clean up plastic waste from the environment through take-back systems, through cleanups, through awareness campaign, through research. And within the last 2 years, government has been observing this framework of cooperation and see how successful it has been. Of course, it has helped create an environment where government and private sector discusses about the PET bottle, unlike the past. However, there's still need for a more systemic way of managing the plastic pollution, and more so about the PET bottle, because we do not seem to get a lot of traction around it. But then in 2019, last year, June, the president himself directed that the ban of the single-use plastic in all protected areas should come into effect this year on the 4th of June 2020. So this ban is it should be taking effect in 2 months' time, and it's a ban that says that the plastic PET or the single-use plastic will not be used in national parks, will not be used in beaches, will not be used in forests, will not be used in conservation areas, by virtue of just one reason, that it drifts. When you go to the beach, even if you say you'll collect back, it's never easy, because if it gets to the ocean, then it is carried away. And our marine life is actually threatened. So in the last 1 year, government has been working hand in hand with private sector to see how do we implement this ban. What does it mean for private sector? And as a result, now there's 2 things that have been done, or 3 things that have been done. There is the sustainable waste management policy that has been made. This policy kind of transforms the whole waste management approach that Kenya has used in the past. All our laws, including the waste management regulations of 2006, are very linear, but we needed something that injects the circularity element within the regulatory system. So the policy was developed, and it's now at the cabinet level. It will change completely how we handle waste management generally. It will also help us to be able to look at the whole waste management value chain from the beginning to the end. It also changes how we define waste, because currently it's the authority that defines what is waste. But the policy says going forward, it is the user who will determine when a product actually becomes waste. That is a very major shift in the definition of waste, and then consequently, how do you handle the waste? Then there's also the National Sustainable Management Bill that equally entrenches some of those ideas into law, so that going forward, there are certain things that are not provided for right now, like segregation at source, that then will become enforced in law, that will be segregating our waste from source going forward. But to be able to help us through our observations between 2018 and 2020, especially through the PET framework of cooperation, we saw the arising of voluntary producer responsibility organization for managing of waste specifically. And the producer responsibility organization put in place at the moment has really tried to do its best. But the biggest challenge was the fact that it is voluntary, therefore not everybody is participating, and therefore putting the burden of responsibility to a few producers and leaving the rest of everyone become what you call free riders. And therefore it's become very important then to institute a more mandatory extended producer responsibility in the country that then like mandates every producer and every person who is part of a chain in a product to be a member of a producer responsibility organization, and also so that they're able to manage their waste. So going forward, what the government is looking at is not that an individual entity manages their waste alone, because it is very, very expensive to manage it in a circular manner, but you have to be a member of a producer responsibility organization, so that that producer responsibility organization helps its members in initiating or in instituting a circular approach to the waste management. So for tourism sector, what maybe you look at is how can the tourism sector, how can the hotels and the entities within the tourism sectors actually be members of a producer responsibility organization that then helps them to manage their PET waste, their plastic waste. And even still, you're also looking at the organic waste also element of it, because if it's 60% is organic, then the rest is recyclables, but a bunch of it, a lot of it is plastic. So that way then, within the land, within the inland, let me call it within the inland, then we are able to manage our plastic leakages using a PRO mechanism. Then we reduce the leakages of plastic into our marine lives and into our protected areas and into the ocean. So when we are talking about the what measures should the rest of the sectors put in place, or even ourselves, is that we are also instituting what you call the eco-design. Within the EPR, it's not just the waste issue alone, but also the product itself. Part of the biggest challenge within the country for recycling has been that most of the materials are not recyclables. Even the plastic at the moment, they are so composite that it is difficult to recycle them, that they actually just become waste. Therefore, the recyclability of a product will be very important as far as a producer is concerned. And you as the user, like a hotel, you also be very careful that the products you're accepting within your system should be the ones that are easily recyclable, so that you are kind of defining the standard of the products that you receive, so that you are not left with a lot of waste in your hand. Therefore, going forward, we have a holistic approach towards the plastic management and even waste management as a whole. So that is not just the collection, the transportation, the disposal, and the recycling, but even the design. We have to rethink the designs of our products. We have to rethink how we label them, the stickers we use on them, how easily they can be made into valuable materials, so that we have less waste going into the environment going forward. I believe that is a good nutshell, Ebenezer.
Yeah,
Hello,
sure.
Ebenezer.
Thanks, Faith, for the quick overview.
Yeah.
We appreciate you taking your time to join us and just giving us a quick overview in a nutshell of the regulation from where we came from in terms of looking at the different waste streams and the reason behind it, and even looking at the benefits of the plastic itself and why this regulation came up. So thank you so much, Faith. So Faith is a PPD expert, and she also takes charge of the environment and sector board, environment, water and natural resources sector board. So we appreciate your time. Karine, you can take us to the next step. Karine, can you hear us?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, I had an internet thing.
Okay.
Good. Great. shall we move? I see a few questions. Do we want to take time now?
I think we have two options, because I'm seeing we have about a few minutes to go. So we can either take the questions now or take it at the tail end, after we look at the different variety that we have, or rather a reaction from the tourism sector.
Yeah, okay, let's move on now, and then we do it afterwards. We can take all kinds of questions. Thank you, Faith. Let's go to the poll we have done. Sorry for that. We are going to look at alternatives for single-use products. And so we just quickly run through the items and what can you replace it with. And therefore, I would like Praxidas actually to shine her light on that.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Praxidas. There's noise at the background, I believe. Okay, what I'll do is to run through a few of the alternatives, and Stella will support me, but let me go through a few. And okay, with the ban, a few things are mentioned, yes, and that are maybe going to be banned from the protected areas. But what I'll do is we have seen, like, for example, straws. We can be able to use aluminum straws or bamboo straws. And these come in handy because they are part of what has been banned already. And also we can use paper bags instead of, because the plastic bags were banned, we can have the alternative of paper bags, or like in Kenya, we have the Kiondos, sisal bags, and also cloth bags. We can also be able to use that. And maybe for our offices, as we take our water in single-use plastic bottles, we can opt for dispensers and use our glasses. And also we can use refillable water bottles, maybe which are made from aluminum, or even if it's plastic, it's something that you can be able to reuse for as many times as possible, instead of the single-use one that you take your water and then you leave it on the table after your meeting and then you go. And also one thing that happens when we use these single-use plastics that I noted is that we waste a lot of water, because you take your water and you not finish it because maybe you feel like it's a lot of it, the 500 ml, and you can't finish it, so you leave it there, and it's also wasted. And also we can use like for our cups, we can make sure that we also use reusable cups instead of the single-use one that we use once and throw away. And also we can decide to use eco cups. These I remember last year we were able to import some from outside, and I think these are a very also good opportunity for our private sector industry to just look into what does our industry want, and what is available and what is not available. So it's a very good opportunity, because generally for Kenya, when you try to find out about the alternatives, the market is very big, the need is there, but the alternatives are not available. So I think it's a very big challenge and call to all our private sector people to come out with alternatives that are going to be able to reach our market. Because you'll say, you find like someone will say, yes, this is being banned. I'm being advised to use a bamboo straw, but how do I access it? Where is it? How can I get it? So the private sector needs to grab this opportunity also. Okay.
On the same note, if I may add on to what Praxedis has just brought up, we as sustainable inclusive business have banded together a number of alternative suppliers targeting those who can supply particularly the items that have been banned, and we are looking at developing a directory that will be accessible to you as stakeholders in the tourism, hospitality and MICE industry in Kenya, so that you are able to look at alternatives suitable for you as a hotel, as a conference organizer, or whatever industry you are in, and be able to pick out someone who has experience in supplying some of these things, who has the capacity to supply, and then you'll be able to be comfortable in the implementation of the ban without struggling to look for alternative suppliers. This will be made available on the Sustainable Inclusive Business website. We will also make sure that we share it on email so that it is fully accessible to you, probably in the next 2 weeks or so. Ebenezer, do you want to add on that?
We'll also be doing another poll at the end of this session where we'll be evaluating the webinar, and they'll also be asking you if you want access to the directory. So just look out for that, and we'll give you some time to answer. We have seen a number of questions coming in, Karim. So we'll tackle them a bit later at the end. I've seen a question from Brian, a question from Barbara, and also contribution from John and Gabriel. Karim? You're on mute.
Sorry. Yes, I see a number of questions coming in. We want to also hear from the industry itself. So I actually want to give the opportunity to Gabrielle to share what her experience is, and because with her business, she already tried really hard to apply no single-use plastic in general. And so she can share the challenges and also the success stories. So I think that would be very great. Yeah, and also she will answer some of the questions. And we try to, what Stella was pointing at, try to bundle all the knowledge and all the alternatives we are having and things that are recommended. And also this will be a dynamic directory, because we discover that maybe an alternative material we will discover in a year's time that is actually not the greatest material to use. So it's also a new industry, it's a new area to replace plastics. And we have to work together to make sure that we are using the right alternatives and we don't end up using the plastic nets for your shoppings instead of the plastic bags, as was mentioned before. So I would like to invite Gabrielle from Sunworld Safaris to share her experience on how to implement it, and also how this COVID actually is going to affect further implementation of this ban.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me, Karen? Okay, great. My name is Gabrielle Novak. I'm the CEO of Sunworld Safaris. We are local tour operators and have been in the industry for about 23 years. And I also chair the Environment Committee at the Kenya Association of Tour Operators, and also part of the KTF Environment Committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to briefly give a few points on the industry. We also run a luxury tinted camp in the Masai Mara called Mara Bush Camp, and I have been trying to avoid as much as possible single-use plastic for the last few years. And of course, it's an ever-evolving journey, because there is lots of innovative ideas that keep coming up and that we keep trying to adopt. Maybe just a few things on the industry itself, on what we have done previously before COVID happened, and I would like to share that with you. Ecotourism Kenya, for example, has established in their eco-rating scheme of bronze, silver and gold ratings for camps and lodges that single-use plastic must be now included in the rating scheme, which is really important, as before it was not there. So if you are an eco-rated property, you must adhere to the policies of not using single-use plastic as much as possible. Beach hotels 2 years ago have signed a pledge that they would go single-use plastic free for a year and then be adopted into the scheme of the same, and of course also trying to assist in cleaning up the beaches that we have on the north and south coast, and also Battamo areas. And that simply means that they would avoid plastic bottles. Our responsibility as tour operators, as hotels, camps and lodges is of course to educate our clients and educate fellow industry members. What we have done from Kato, for example, we have given some guidelines for tour operators and we have put that on our website. That's the Kato website. The way forward is, of course, now with COVID being there, and I have to say that the industry has been really hit in a terrible manner. We have no income at the moment for both hotels, camps and lodges, but also for tour operators and travel agents. And we all need to rethink our strategies for the future. And when you go single-use plastic free, you also have to invest in some ways. One of the ideas we had was to offer clients single wall steel bottles that we would use instead of plastic bottles, with a dispenser in the vehicle for tour operators, but also dispensers in camps, lodges and hotels, so the clients can fill up their bottles. And that has been a challenge in the sense that we were going to get a large shipment in from China for these bottles for the entire industry at a reasonable cost, but we have been unable to do so, and the majority of operators are now not interested in doing so because they simply don't have the budget due to other financial constraints. I think an idea would be, for example, instead of single-use masks, we could be offering our clients cloth masks and definitely refillable sanitizers. I think sanitizer will have to be available in all camps, lodges and also vehicles, and this can be done in a refillable container and not in a plastic container. Other ideas, as Praxidis mentioned, what we are already implementing at our camp, for example, is the use of metal straws, bee-wax covers instead of cellophane, glass carafes on the table for refillable water from dispensers. Definitely the hygiene is very important there. Then we have used our old wine bottles and cleansed them and put them into the clients' rooms for water. We are refilling all shampoo bottles in a metal bottle, and we are not using any plastic actually for shampoo bottles. So all hotels, camps and lodges will have to rethink their small shampoo and conditioner and body lotion containers. Also for packed lunches and breakfasts, we have done this always in brown paper bags or boxes with no plastic cutlery, but metal cutlery that can be, of course, washed and cleansed and brought back. Further, what we have done is we have requested our suppliers, for example, for fruits and veg, not to pack it into nets, but to simply offer it in crates, open, so that we do not have to dispose of any nets. Nets are also quite bad for the environment. For any packed meals, in addition, one can use little glass jars, mini jars, where you can fill in butter, jam, ketchup, whatever is necessary for a packed meal. And that would again avoid these little plastic containers that we used to give in the past. The same can be done with yogurts and also with juices. Juices can be filled in glass bottles. We, for example, offer fresh juice in the morning for our clients when they go out on a game drive, and we never use a Tetra Pak for the last 2 years. Another idea would be to recycle vegetable oil into soap. There is a company we work with called Akusi, and old vegetable oil, sunflower oil, etc. can be made into soap, and we are using plastic milk bottles that I've collected at home, and we fill those up with the soap, and this can be sent to the camps for use for our staff members, but also can be distributed. Right now, I think there's a lot of need for soap, even in areas such as the slums, and we're doing that as a CSR project in addition to a few other things. Then definitely I think it's important for camps and lodges to contribute to cleaning up villages, and the youth can be employed to do so. The only challenge we have is the transportation of this plastic waste back to Nairobi. We need to think about how that can be done. So I think that's more or less all from my side. I think at the moment, maybe one last thing to say, since we want to try and avoid single-use plastic bottles, or we have to, an idea would be to ask your own clients to come along with their own reusable and refillable bottle, especially for domestic tourists, which we will start off when our lockdown opens. This is a good idea and would avoid investing into any steel bottles at this point. That's all from my end. Good luck. Please access the Kato website for some more ideas. And I think the green directory, once it's up, will be a fantastic idea on where to source what and how to help each other during this time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Gabrielle, for your clear vision and sharing of experience and what is possible now and how you deal with it. So I think it's very nice to have this kind of practical insight. We would like to just a very brief run through how to communicate or just give some examples, because sometimes it's being perceived as a negative thing, like not providing a straw with your drink or not providing your lunch packed in plastic. And I think what is also very important is the sensitization, what Fred also mentioned, in general, I think, because it can actually increase if you bring your own, and you can also have alternatives that are equally hygienic, but we need to inform each other very well, and we can communicate about that. We have just composed very briefly some tiny little communication sentences, how to explain to your customers why you don't provide cotton buds, for instance. So that would be able, we can say, we can tackle that by do you hear us? And don't use the plastic ones after checking out your ear for 2 seconds. So there are alternatives for it, but you can also say that it might not be so healthy to check out your ears on a regular basis with a cotton bud. And then what Gabrielle also mentioned, if you can replace cutlery with a metal one, for instance, it's actually really nice, and it feels more of a luxury than having plastics most of the time. So it's also a way of making your customers feel more exclusive. Obviously for food containers, but also bringing refillable bottles, you might get then your water complimentary, or you get a discount if you don't need a food container. Otherwise you need to have another a container that is not disposable, and you have to pay for that instead of when you bring your own, you get a discount, so it's actually better and makes you aware. For the balloons and for the sticks of the balloons, we would like to celebrate, we can say we can like to celebrate this occasion with tailor-made decoration, amazing fabrics, fresh locally grown flowers, and handmade cushions, covers, and tablecloth. So you actually make people feel better about not having balloons, but alternatives that you can reuse for different customers, for example. In terms of the cups for the beverages, yeah, bring your own, refill it for free, have a glass and fill it up. Juices are fresh, and sodas come in glass too. So 1.5 billion water bottles are thrown away in the world in one day. So this is quite a significant number. That's why we want to get rid of it. Oh, Then the cigarette butts, yes, you can share with people that you have specific ashtrays where they can dispose it, and point out zones where they can smoke, and either leave, or you give them a tiny little mini ashtray and you bring it back later. The bags, we can say they're really not needed. And in terms of the crisps package, sweet wrappers and bread bags, we can even tempt people to bring their homemade snacks in lovely containers when you go out. Wet wipes and sanitary items. And there are washable, safe purse to dispose your sanitary items later in designated bins. That could be an option that you can provide them with, or you make them aware that it's not possible to safely dispose them, so that they are careful when they travel. Then we would like to actually invite, and I want to very quickly come back to one thing to be clear, because I think we brought in the EPR and policies, and those are not directly related to the industry, tourism, hospitality, and MICE, what we're talking about today. This is not linked to the single-use plastic ban on the 10 items we're having in restricted areas. This is, we want to share actually what kind of environment, and what kind of, what is the government looking at in a bigger picture, and who do we make responsible for what kind of use. So we brought that in to see where other sectors are also moving towards rethinking materials and having a responsible way of disposing waste, and in this case plastics. So that's why we brought them in. I would like to invite you to even rethink and consider more. So you don't have to limit yourself, what Gabrielle was sharing already, to the single-use plastic ban items, but we can actually try and see whether we can do it everywhere, and increase other items for not use or do use. So food wrapping, film foil, we can come up with it, reuse containers and baskets. Cheap plastic giveaways like trinkets, we can actually make from locally made material, natural materials, or for instance the flip-flops turned into great tourism souvenirs. Napkin contains plastic, so can we have cotton napkins in fun designs and reuse them? They are not forbidden yet, so we can come up with an alternative for that. Shampoo, soap, bathroom items. There's even a very fun, we want to share that with you as well. There's a fun little app which is called My Little Plastic Footprint. And My Little Plastic Footprint will actually allow you to go on a plastic diet. So you can make it more personal, but they also give you tips and tricks. They might not be all relevant, but there's fun things to pick. Oh, a shampoo bottle, I can replace it with that. A plastic razor, I can replace it with a metal one, and keep on reusing that. Plastic water boilers, replace them with others. Decoration, have reusable decoration. So we will invite you to actually, and hopefully that is also the ban, to use it in a positive way. We will ask you, and please leave your comments also in the chat box. What do you need? What would you need? What would you be helped with to actually support you in going no single-use plastic and really apply that? Do you need, if you need the directory, we did the poll, but maybe there are other things you need. Maybe you need partners in the industry. Let us know what you would be helped with. Then we will provide you with some crash course, the trend report, and also leave other topics I saw in the questions about solid waste management. We can look at the same industry and talk about food waste and how to deal with that in a different way. That would be a topic for another day, but if you need that and you would be interested, leave your topics with us as well. And then, yes, we will have some time to answer some more questions before we actually wrap up this session.
Yeah. Karine, do you want to proceed, or you want to take a few questions?
Yeah, I would like to have some questions.
At the moment, we have a poll. Okay, at the moment, we have a poll that is up in terms of single-use plastic. That's the acronym of SUP, Alternative Directory. So you can choose in terms of what your answer is. If you strongly agree, if this should be made available, or agree, or you can decide, disagree, or strongly agree. So you have 37 participants that have already answered. So please, the rest. At the moment, you have 46 participants. So you can quickly finalize on that. So if we go to the next poll. We had different questions in here, but I believe, Karina, you've answered most of them. Question from I think from Gabriel, from Kim, and I think also Fred had an input there saying that we should ensure that we sensitize our operators, to operators, especially on single-use plastic. That's a good idea. Dr. John was talking about integrated solid waste management. I believe you've talked about that. Barbara was asking about, I think she was she was giving a comment there in terms of alternatives of suppliers on the Kato website. And then we also had, I'll just go through, Maria mentioned that she was able to source for sugarcane packaging. That's for packed foods, I believe, including cutlery. So it will be interesting, Maria, for you to share your source. Then we can also include it as part of the directory. You can hit us up on our email directly. Thank you so much for the questions.
Ebenezer?
Yes.
This is Faith. I've seen a
Yes.
question, how to set up a producer responsibility organization. Huh?
Yes, yes. I saw that question, but I think Karine mentioned that on the EPR we'll have another webinar to delve deeper into the EPR. But you can give us a one-liner or a feedback on that as we look forward to the next webinar, Faith.
Yeah, thank you very much. The process of setting up a producer responsibility organization is set up within the new regulations, because you realize within the country there isn't even a definition of what a producer responsibility organization is legally. So the regulations kind of provide a way of defining what is a producer responsibility organization. But I think the most one thing to note is that the regulations propose one producer responsibility organization per one waste stream. That way then the producer responsibility organization then deals with volumes of waste as opposed to it being like an economic activity. At the moment, I know business people want to look at it like other businesses, but remember the objective of a PRO is environmental sustainability. Then it equally sets up the process of how to set up one. You must have a discussion with the stakeholders who must agree, because a producer responsibility organization is like a membership organization. The members that register into the organization are your members, and therefore that means they'll register to the organization, they'll pay subscription, they'll meet some certain conditions that then the producer responsibility organization then accounts to the government. So the whole of that process is clearly set up in the draft regulations, and I'd ask you to kindly go through there and just have a look at it, even as we plan to have a better session for the same.
Yeah, thanks, Faith, for that, for providing clarity on that. So we have the poll result out, where we're asking the question, or it was rather a statement. I would recommend for the directory on alternatives on single-use plastic to be made available. So 87% says they strongly agree, 11% says they agree, and 3% say that they strongly disagree. So we appreciate your feedback on that. If you have further clarification that you need, just hit us up on the chat. So, Karine, we go to some few questions that were sent through.
I see there's a few questions, and also about the carbon footprint. One, I think it's what's great is what's happening now, and that's why it's a directory which we call dynamic. because everyone is figuring out what is available in Kenya, what is not available in Kenya, do we have good experience with it? And that's exactly what we want to set up. Gather, please share in the chat and share with us where you have good experiences for alternatives, because then we can put that in the directory, where hopefully we'll be able to make sure that that platform runs, that you can review it and that you can rate the alternatives as well as an industry. So we eliminate the bad alternatives and we keep on adding the great alternatives. In terms of footprint, this is a conversation comes back all the time. Yes, because glass is more with transport. It's much heavier, so you will need more fuel, etc., etc. So yes, there are questions about how sustainable is it. I just like to point out one thing. We are not able to dispose single-use plastic responsibly, and that's why we get a ban. So then you can't use it if we can't do it. It might be great if we would be able to really dispose it properly and have set up a waste management system that completely takes back those materials and also recycles them. In the end, we have to look at the thing that we are using non-renewable resources. So you will keep on pushing materials like plastic into the society where we use it, and we will have to, every time we have a new bottle of soda, we have to have new virgin materials. That is not sustainable, regardless whether we are talking about whether glass is heavier to transport or to wash it out. So we have to look at the fact that it's not, this a linear economy and our resources are not endless. We cannot keep on taking, making, and then wasting. That is not a sustainable cycle, so we have to look at alternatives. Whether glass is a best alternative for plastics, if you talk about a lot of transportation, it might be not having the correct footprint or the footprint we would like to look at. But if you look at your lodges, you can easily replace a plastic bottle by a glass one and keep on refilling it, and preferably having a water bottle facility at your lodge. In terms of metal and aluminium are 100% recyclable, also glass. So this is a resource you can use over and over again. It will not lose any of the quality of the material. A tin with beans in the supermarket will be recycled over and over and over again. So you don't actually never really need to increase the amount of virgin materials to make the same tin over and over again. You could use that. And that's what we ultimately want to drive towards, to a circular economy where we close those loops and we don't need new materials in our system because we can keep on reusing them. And the lifespan is much longer. And ultimately, if we can't reuse them again, we have to recycle it and we can again reuse it for the same purpose. That would be the utopia we're working towards. So that is that. Like plastics, even good quality plastics, we are able to convert a 100% PET bottle into a 100% PET bottle, but the technology is expensive at the moment. And also during the recycle process, we will slowly lose the quality of the material.
Many thanks, Karin. I think we have another question where someone had said it earlier. The question goes that tackling plastic awareness needs a holistic approach involving all stakeholders. We don't see any public awareness or call to action from national government or at county level or through waste collection partners. So the question here is, how is education, communication, or awareness being integrated into all stakeholders for everyone to get on board and to support its short and long-term targets on plastic and help its attaining the Agenda 2030 targets? I believe the question here is looking at raising awareness, both from the national government level and the county governments. I believe this also includes the private sector. because if you talk about a holistic approach, that it clearly involves all stakeholders. Karina, any comments?
No, I think I'm really looking forward actually to get more feedback on alternatives to the single-use plastic. I just, in general, or to wrap up the discussion, we have some a fun video on the end, how to go single-use plastic, no single-use plastic yourself. I think it has been mentioned also before that we have to be very clear. There's not a ban on all single-use plastic items, because there are many, there are plenty. Your pasta, your whatever you buy in the supermarket, it's packed in plastic packaging and you use it once. So there is no ban on that. There's a ban on 10 items in restricted areas. We would like people to be encouraged and to actually apply that to a broader area. So that is one thing. The EPR and the PRO, so to set up a producer responsibility organization, or to be part of an extended producer responsibility organization, is not applying to this specific sector. What is applying is that you're not able to use the 10 items which are banned in those areas. And the other thing a lot of people don't know is actually that the hospitality tourism industry is obliged by law to actually recycle 50% of their total waste. So also solid waste, they have to recycle 50% of it by giving it or having a contract with a legal recycler in waste management space in Kenya. So those are the things applicable. We are mentioning the EPR because it will bring us back to where and who is responsible for actually coming up with the single-use items and what are they made of and where's the responsibility for the producers in that. And that's how you can see actually that different sectors need to work together. I mean, waste is an issue we all have. Waste is unfortunately something that everyone creates and every business creates. So that we need to be very clear on. We are really looking forward to compose that directory collectively with everyone in the industry. We would love to hear also feedback on other topics you find really interesting. Please share it with us. Also share with us what you need to actually move to no single-use plastic. So thank you very much for this, for the attention to the topic, also during this crisis time. And I hope we provided some insights, and we will definitely share you, as promised, more, because we have also the email addresses, so we can provide you with more information regarding this topic.
Yeah, thanks, Karine. Just to mention something briefly, as we try and head out, as you mentioned with the last video, is that I will also be putting up another poll for you to evaluate our webinar. We apologize also for taking a bit longer than expected. But of course, we also appreciate you taking your time to be part of this webinar. We still have 46 participants at the moment, which is a good thing. So you can quickly write on this chart, as Karina has mentioned, some of the topics that we'd like us to address in the next webinar. That would be great. Yeah, so thank you so much. Karina, we can move ahead.
Thank you very much. I will do the video. Let me quickly make a picture of us doing the webinar and then staying in touch. I wish you all a great day, and I hope very soon we are having better times and we can talk about a post-COVID situation and build sustainable businesses further.